Ranking member.
Very depressing. Dr. Ball, you've studied the impact of 5-star quality ratings and country of origin labeling on consumer choice. But as you know, not everybody has the skill set that Mr. Baker described of being able to know which vendor is actually safe. So patients don't have much choice in choosing which medicines their pharmacies or hospitals or nursing homes choose to stock. And they arguably don't have the level of sophistication they would need to be able to choose anyway. In hospitals and some nursing homes, patients may not have access to containers where the 5-star quality rating or country of origin labels would be placed. So how can five-star rating quality ratings? How can a 5-star quality rating system and country of origin label promote the use of high-quality drugs when patients often don't have much choice? And how can this proposal incentivize hospitals and other purchasers to purchase high-quality drugs when institutions often face pressures to keep costs low? And third, how would you recommend that the FDA conduct inspections and update their 5-star quality ratings?
Thank you, Senator, for the great questions. So our solution that we've tested in our paper is a first step. And the first step is, and I've had my parents and elderly family members ask me, how do I know where this drug is made and if it's safe? If you arm the person at the pharmacy desk or the patient to look at a bottle and say, now, why is this a 3-star drug? That question in of itself could make a big difference, because groups like the AARP could all of a sudden have a voice to say, why are we selling 3-star or 2-star drugs to our constituents? You're correct that it wouldn't fix everything overnight, that hospitals, when they buy it in group packaging, may not have the stars on them until the solution get properly fixed there, that group purchasing organizations may be less sensitive. But the notion is that if it becomes transparent for every level of the supply chain, the manufacturers are no longer able to hide, and they have to somehow figure out a way to compete on quality. It wouldn't fix the problem overnight, but it would also allow group purchasing organizations who change suppliers based on pennies, which is often the case what we hear in our research, to look at this and say, yes, we may save a penny, but this is going from a 3-star drug to a 2-star drug. That has consequences for the people that are in the insurance program that they serve, or the elderly person that picks it up at CVS and asks their pharmacist, why are you giving me a 2-star drug? That conversation is the starting point to put pressure on firms. It's not perfect, but it's the beginning, and it's much better than what we have now.
Thank you. Mr. Baker, off of Dr. Ball's answers, how should country of origin labeling be implemented to take into account the origins of a generic drug's components versus the manufacturing site of the generic in its final form?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that because over the years, having seen the sites and thinking about transparency, that this would eventually come based on what we were uncovering. And there's no real perfect solution, but there are some, for each different type of drug, if you're talking about a solid oral product or an injectable product, there are at least one step that is very critical to quality for the purity and in some cases sterility. And so putting that on the label would force companies to take that step seriously and also possibly diversify supply chain for those critical steps to have those in areas that are reliable. And so, for example, an aseptically filled product, where is that bottle being filled?
Yep.
Because that is, again, there are other players, but that one is the most critical.
Dr. Piervincenzi, your written testimony, you indicated the United States relies heavily on India and China, and I think the chairman's questions about those two countries have been very insightful. And the majority of these KSMs are produced in China. You also highlighted how one KSM, thymidine, is produced only in China. Can you speak to why the United States is currently unable to produce certain key starting materials beyond the environmental impacts of the manufacturing process?
Yeah, so thank you, Senator. So the key starting material is this fancy term. I think, Senator Scott, you sort of said this earlier, that is only relevant to its use in a pharmaceutical ingredient. What the rest of the world will call them is chemicals. Mm-hmm. They're chemicals. The chemical industry had left the U.S. for the most part a long time ago, before pharma. In fact, that's how pharma started in the U.S. It followed the chemical industry in New Jersey, it became pharma. And so there's no mystery as to why it left the U.S. for environmental reasons and just cost and all the reasons we know. There is something unique about medicines is that they are very light users of very expensive chemicals. So what I mean is, and many of the chemicals used in drugs are used for lots of other industrial and other purposes, but in much, much larger quantities.
Yep.
So that the chemical company, so there are very rarely to have a key starting material company, because most of them are chemical companies who sell some key starting materials. They therefore are a small portion of their business. This further complicates this supply chain because later on, we're talking about medicines all the way along, API, finished dose, regulated by FDA, but these chemical companies they're not even in the medical business. So the incentive or to think about how do we secure our key starting materials is not only the area of greatest risk, it's what we least have in the US or even among US's allies. It's also the hardest of the three pieces to solve. And we think we have to look at the KSM model, your chemicals, and think, well, how do we start to source it? Where else in the world? You think we need to be more flexible about the world and think about it? And we may consider more onshoring on API, but we have to be pretty flexible on the key starting materials. But the current model is unsustainable. But we'll have some real numbers in a couple of months. I think it's about even less than 2 months where we can start to look at them as tangible. And Senator Scott, to your point earlier, we have to be able to have some data. Otherwise, it's very hard to get action going. And hopefully this will be the first time we have data on specifically what key starting materials, where, and then we have the very important next conversation is how else can we make them?
Yep.
And maybe just to wrap up there, but there are some cases we can make them a different way that doesn't follow the chemical industry, but uses biotech processes. And that we could do in the US.
That's good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Great hearing.